question I get a lot as a truck accident attorney is what type of damages can I receive for my injuries? So, another way of thinking about it is what are the categories of things that I've lost that I can receive compensation for? Hi, I'm Bob Byrne. I am a board certified truck accident lawyer here in Virginia, and I handle cases around other states as well. So hopefully this video is going to provide some helpful information to you to tell you what type of compensation you can receive. So to start with, it's helpful to think of damages in personal injury actions as two separate kinds. There's two kind of buckets. One is economic damages. As I like to explain to juries, those are pocketbook damages. Those are the things that have invoices or receipts that are attached to them because they're things that we buy and sell or at least pay for every day. The second bucket of damages are non-economic damages, and those are kind of life damages like pain and suffering. Things that we don't necessarily actually pay for, that we don't have a dollar and cents receipt or an invoice. And that can be a little bit trickier. So with those two buckets in mind, let's take a look at the Virginia jury instruction that juries actually look at to see what are the categories of compensation that someone can receive. I want to start with the bucket of the economic damages. And if you look at this list, I'm going to go out of order because of that. We're going to jump down to number 5, which is going to look at medical bills, both in the past, from the time of the crash up until the present, and then from the present into the future. And it's important to understand that a lot of people who are in bad truck crashes don't just have past medical expenses, but they have future medical expenses. And those are oftentimes much, much larger than what you have in the past. So it's important to work with an attorney who knows how to deal with physicians and life care planners and rehabilitation doctors so that you can really get an idea of what those future medical expenses will be. A second category in the economic damages bucket would be lost earnings. And so if somebody's unable to work because of their injuries, they're entitled to be paid for the amount of work that they missed. Now that can get complicated when you're someone who's self-employed, but that's something that knowledgeable, skilled, experienced attorneys can deal with. Kind of a necessary part of this is that you may have past lost earnings and you may also have future lost earnings. And so it's important to know if your injuries are going to prevent you from being able to do your job in the future. A third category in the economic damages bucket would be lost earning capacity. Lost earning capacity could be really technical. The best way to understand this is by giving an example. So let's say you have someone who is a nurse, but they're also taking night classes so that they could get their medical degree. And they have established that their goal is to be a doctor. They want to be a doctor. They're planning to be a doctor. They've been working for that really their whole adult life. But then this crash happens, and now they're not going to be able to be a doctor. Now, let's say that in that situation, they would have as a nurse a base salary of $75,000, but as a doctor, their base salary would be $400,000. Now that difference between those two amounts is what's called lost earning capacity. And lost earning capacity, when you stretch it out over time, could be massive. It could be a huge, huge claim. And it requires an attorney to work with vocational rehabilitation specialists, rehabilitation doctors, economists, all sorts of experts to actually go through and to establish that claim. And it's important that the attorney who's handling those has the technical know-how to be able to do those claims. The last kind of category in the economic damages bucket is property damage, and that one's pretty straightforward. So if you have your vehicle and say items that were in the vehicle that were damaged or destroyed as a result of a crash, you're entitled to be compensated for that lost property damage. Okay, so having gone through the bucket dealing with the economic damages, let's look at the second bucket, which is the non-economic damages. And this is really where kind of a trial lawyer is going to have to develop a lot of skills and art and abilities to explain this claim to insurance adjusters and to juries to really enhance the value to show the human losses that the client has suffered. The first category of non-economic damages in this second bucket would be bodily injuries, as well as the severity of those injuries and the duration of those injuries. A good way to understand this is by comparing. If on the one hand you were in a rear ender, it hurt your neck, had a couple of rounds of physical therapy, and then you're back to normal, you don't feel like you have any issues, then it was a short period of time that bothered you. It's not particularly problematic, and there's not going to be permanent injuries. Compare that to someone who is paralyzed from the neck down in a crash. In that situation, the severity is as high as it possibly can be, but also that the duration is as high as it can be because it's going to last for the rest of the person's life. And so when you look at not just the severity of the injuries, but how long they'll last, those are non-economic damages that someone is entitled to recover. The next category of non-economic damages in the non-economic damages bucket are something that people really understand, which is pain and suffering. There's pain and suffering both in the past and in the future. There's the time from the crash up until the trial, and then if somebody has a permanent injury, like with the example of the paralysis, then that is suffering and pain that is going to last for the rest of that person's life. And those are very, very significant in cases like that. And so oftentimes the pain and the suffering is far greater than the medical bills or the lost wages or even the lost earning capacity, even though you can't put a dollar and cents figure on the pain and suffering. Juries know that the best things in life are free. They're the sorts of things that you cannot pay for. You know, there's sayings that you can have everything in the world, but if you don't have your health, then you really have nothing. And there are people who are very, very wealthy, but they're unhealthy, and they would give just about anything to be able to have their health back, even if it means losing their wealth. And I think people really understand that, and they know that when you are in a terrible crash and you lose your health as a result, that is a significant, massive loss that juries recognize and that they will provide compensation for. And it's important to understand that pain and suffering is also not just kind of physical pain and physical suffering. It also can be mental anguish in all of the weight that people have to carry, knowing that they perhaps are now a burden on their family, that they can't provide for their family, that they can't necessarily do their tasks that are things that they enjoy so much, that are their talents and their skills and their abilities, and instead they're in more of a position where they have to rely on others to help them. That is something that really can amplify the pain and suffering that someone feels. An additional category that goes into the non-economic bucket would be disfigurement or deformity, as well as any embarrassment or humiliation that will occur as a result. You know, you will see sometimes people will have not necessarily terrible bodily injuries that prevent them from functioning, but they could have terrible facial scars, or they might have amputations, or they may have different types of disfigurement, say from burns. And those are things that are just terribly deforming and humiliating to them. It's something that they have a hard time seeing their old self, and instead all they can see is this new, scarred, deformed version of themselves. Again, those are things that you can't necessarily put a dollar figure on, but juries are well aware that that is a horrific, horrible, huge loss. Another category that goes into this second non-economic damages bucket would be inconvenience. Inconvenience doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but I would venture to say that most people are kind of living life at right at the breaking point. We don't have time or capacity or the energy or the mental ability to put more on our plates. And when we're in a position where we're shuttling kids around and we're trying to take care of elderly parents and we're trying to do everything that's required for work and try to help our communities and do things like that, and then all of a sudden there's an injury, and now we have to disrupt those things because we have to start going to doctor's appointments and therapy appointments and all of these things. It's terribly, terribly inconvenient. And jurors understand that that inconvenience is a major problem, and they will step up and they will try to rectify that when that happens. So hopefully this is helpful. When you're looking at both of these types of categories, it's important that you understand that they look back to the past, but if you continue to have problems that go into the future, then those future damages need to be accounted for, whether they're medical expenses, problems with deformity and scarring, inconvenience, pain and suffering, those sorts of things. If you have questions about a truck crash or other personal injury action, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be more than happy to speak with you. I do thank you for watching this video. If you haven't yet, please like and please subscribe, and please stay tuned for more videos. Thanks.